My name is Sadie Clonell, and I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I own Knox Survival Paint Company. One of the tips that I give homeowners is to dream of the space that we're getting ready to paint and think to themselves, what do I want to feel like in this space? Now that I know what that feeling is, what color makes me feel that feeling? People will go pick colors based on trends, but really what people need to do is pick colors based on how it makes them feel, not how it makes other people feel, because you're the one living with it. Picking a color for a house can be very daunting. I would walk in and be like, I like this color, this color, this color, this color, and then you think, I'm gonna find a space for all of these things in my house. Sometimes though, when people get in and they've got 4, 5, 6 colors in their house, you don't feel like you're connected to your space. If you're walking from one room to the next room and there is a completely clashing color, you're gonna feel the change of the room. You're gonna go from this serene space of, whatever color makes you feel that way to change the color, and then all of a sudden, you might feel like amped up or energized. I get all of the colors that I wanna use on a board. And then from there, I say, okay, all of these colors together, which one of these colors look the best together? And pick a color that goes with all the other colors. A very good practice is to have all of your walls in a house that are connecting rooms be either the same color or a different strength of the same color. That way they feel connected. I think that any space that feels completely separate is a fun place to do different paints, different wallpapers, to tie those kind of things in. Take a sample of whatever color it is that you're using and take it into every space that it's going to be. So not just do a swatch on a wall in the living room if you're also planning on doing the kitchen the same color. Put it in both spaces, that way you can see the lighting in the kitchen, you can see the lighting in the living room, you can see the lighting wherever it is, because you may have the same white and in both of those spaces it could look completely different. What happens is there'll be a color that's everywhere. You'll have a color of the year from all the different paint companies and it looks beautiful everywhere and you think, oh my gosh, I want to put that in my living room. And part of what is not factored in is that color is still going to be in your living room in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. I think that you have to factor in if you're a person who regularly changes your furniture, if you're somebody who's going to keep that furniture for the next, 5, 10, 15 years, you want to make sure that the color you pick is something that's going to be timeless, not something that's going to be changing with the trends and it's going to be 6 months later and you're feeling frustrated that it's too much color or not enough color. Most of the time with most companies, paint samples come in eggshell. They come in eggshell and it's usually not the lowest grade of that company's paint, but it's more of a mid-grade paint. So anytime you go higher in quality of paint, there usually is going to be more sheen. And the more sheen there is, the more washability there is. This right here is a sample paint. It is very, it's dry, if I rub it too much, we're gonna have fingerprints. So it's an eggshell, but it is a lower grade eggshell. I could wash it, but it's just not to the extent where if I have super muddy hands, or in my case, painty hands, and I rub my hand on it, that I'm gonna be able to clean it. Versus if I go into the same color that is in a higher quality eggshell, it's smooth. It is something, and they're the same application that I put on them, but it's smooth. It's something that if I were to wipe other paint on it, once it's cured, I could just get soap and water and wipe it off. And this is in a scuff resistant paint. So it actually has a tiny bit more sheen, even though they're the same color and the same finish. The number one washable paint is gonna be semi-gloss. I think that a lot of people like trim to be semi-gloss because it is super, super cleanable. Luckily, there have been, changes to paint over the years that make it so that a satin is about as washable as a semi-gloss. The difference is that the semi-gloss, it is super durable, but it is super difficult to touch up. Versus a satin, which I think is the absolute best paint for trim, where you still have some of the sheen, it's super, super washable, but when you touch it up, even if there is a little bit of a difference, you're not able to see it because the light doesn't reflect so highly off of it. When you go down to something like eggshell, it is still super washable, but once again, the reflective value is a lot less, which a lot of people like this on the walls because you want your trim to stand out. Staying with the same color in a different sheen for the trim is amazing. So if you were to go something like this that's a satin, and then you have the same color in something that's a matte, then you have the same color feeling, but the contrast is different. You've got a little bit more washability on your trim, you've got a little bit easier touch up on your walls, and you still feel like you've done something different and there's something fun within the space. Bathrooms hold water. That's just factual. You've got steam all over the place and it's sitting on your walls. You want paint in your bathroom to be super, super cured. Basically what it's saying is that you want a little bit more of like an enamel in your bathroom paint so that steam sits on top of the paint rather than penetrates into the paint. When you have a flat paint, it's still leaving the surface a little bit porous, versus if you have something that's a super high sheen, nothing's getting through here. If you've got something that's more of a flat, I could probably soak something on here and eventually it would be able to soak into this board. So that's why a lot of times I say, regardless of what everything in the house is, in the bathroom, I would do a higher sheen. A satin paint or a specific bathroom paint is always gonna be better because it is more mold resistant and it's much more cleanable. We use a lot of different brushes as painters. A lot of oil-based paints, you're gonna use a boar bristle brush or something that's a natural bristle brush because it's easier to work with oil-based. But there are a lot of different companies that make a Nylox or a nylon bristle, which they're usually kind of orange in color and they're easy to clean with oil-based paints also, versus when you get something like this, which is a thinner bristle, usually this is for latex. Prepare yourself to have quite a bit of paint thinner if you're using an oil-based brush. Once it's cleaned, we'll take it and we'll put it back in the brush cover, and because it holds the form of the brush a lot better, and you actually don't really have to let it dry. We usually take the brush and then we put it back in the cover, seal it up, and then when you store it, just store it like this. These brushes that are 3-inch and flat brushes are really great for exterior paint. It holds more paint and it's easier in siding and things like that to keep a straight edge, versus a brush that is thinner and smaller holds less paint and it's easier for things that are detail oriented where you don't want to be as messy. Let's talk about naps. Beyond brushes, naps are going to be the second most useful thing that you use. They come in pretty much 3 sizes. You've got a 4-inch nap, you've got an 18-inch nap, and then you've got a 9-inch nap. I would say that the most used would be the 9-inch just because it seems to be the typical one that people go towards. As professional painters, we tend to use an 18-inch or a 4-inch more than we ever use a 9-inch nap, because most of the time if you're painting a large space, an 18-inch nap takes up the whole area, so you're only going to have to go through 2 or 3 different passes, versus if you use a 9-inch, you're looking at 5 or 6 to take up a space, like a 12-inch ceiling. If you're using thick paint, you want to use something that is a thicker nap. So for instance, this is a 1/2-inch nap. It's spreading the thicker paint more easily, versus if you have something like this, which is a 3/4-inch nap, it is going to have a smoother finish for paint that is not as thick. So if you're ever rolling a clear coat or something with a higher sheen, you want to use something that is a 3/4 nap. There are a lot of different nap options. The safest thing for you to go with is a 3/8 nap. If you're gonna have a heavier paint or you wanna only do 1 coat, which I don't usually recommend, you wanna use something like a 1/2-inch nap because it's gonna hold more paint and put a thicker coat. I like microfiber naps because I think that they are easy to clean. I think that they always put a smooth finish and you don't really have to worry about there being as much of that texture left on the wall, even when you're using an eggshell paint. A nap like this I really like because it's loose and it holds the paint, but it also releases the paint well. This is a paint grid. So you're gonna take your roller grid and you're gonna just place it in your bucket. I recommend putting it in before you put the paint in the bucket, so you're not gonna wanna put it in the same bucket as the paint that you're using. You'll wanna get an empty bucket. I usually just take an old bucket, take the wrapping off of it, clean it out, and then you're good to go. You'll place the grid into the bucket and it just sits inside underneath the little ledge. And then you're gonna take your mini roller after you've poured the paint in. I never would go above half of the gallon of paint, because then you're gonna start getting into getting all the paint down here and on your hand, and that's very frustrating. So when you're done, you can leave it in there by resting it on this little ledge. There's a little notch that sits so that you're not dunking it into the paint. You'll basically just take the paint and you'll roll it in on the grid, and it pushes the paint off of the roller nap back into there. And then it's really nice because you can just take your grid out, put the lid back on, and then you have a place to store it. You walk into the sandpaper aisle and there are so many different grits of sandpaper. You go from 60 grit, which is super, super rough, to 400, 600, 800 grit, which are super, super smooth. A rule of thumb that I have is you pretty much always have 180 and 220 on you, just period. Anytime there's a wood surface that you're preparing, you're gonna need 180 and 220. When you get into things like clear coats and fine finishes or high glosses, anything that's not just a latex paint on trim, you're gonna wanna get into something that's a little bit higher, like a 320, which is what I would use when I'm finishing a door for sanding in between clear coats. And sometimes I would even go up to a 400. But just for everyday sanding trim, getting ready to paint, I would use 180 or 220. So one thing you also want to remember is if you do need to use a super heavy grit sandpaper, you're always going to want to go back with a higher grit sandpaper to smooth it out. A lot of what I do is I get a full piece of sandpaper and then I'll fold the sandpaper into squares, because it's easier to get into the fine areas, and then you can get into places that are harder to sand with a sanding block. I'll refold it, I'll fold it around, I'll do all these different things so that I can utilize the most out of the sandpaper and not waste it. Painter's tape is the #1 thing that we use in the industry. I spend more money on this than anything else. We use it for everything. We use it to mask, we use it on rollers to clean them, we use it on brushes to keep the paint from dripping down. There are a lot of different types of tape, but what you really want to pay attention to is if it says it's for walls, if it says it's for masonry. If specifically on stone and plaster and brick, we use masonry tape, which is a little bit more tacky, so it sticks to those surfaces. Another item is a hand masker. So you can keep pulling it, it'll keep taking the tape out, and then as soon as you go and you're done and you have the piece that you need, you'll take this, you'll rip it, and then you're ready to put it on whatever surface that you need to do it. You can use tape and you can wrap the tape around the nap, and then after you wrap it, you're just gonna take the tape and peel it off again. And it'll make it so that if there's any loose fuzz or any dust or anything like that, it'll come off on the tape. It'll make it so that there's no dust, no fuzz left. I hope that everything I've talked about is super helpful. The key points are you can help keep your space clean. It makes it easier for yourself. Using high quality materials actually makes a difference. It's gonna be able to last for a longer time and you're gonna enjoy it much better. Anything you're painting, the #1 thing that matters is prep work. What is underneath your painted surface controls how well your painted surface looks. What we would do is we would go in, we would say, I'm looking at this room, let's find every imperfection. The next thing would be to caulk and fill all of the nail holes. You try to fill a hole, there's a little bit of a nail sticking out and it doesn't look right, it starts coming out, you don't really know what to do. So you want all of the nails to be as deeply in as they can without messing up the trim work. There are nail sets that you get that have a spring and you just smack the nail in, super easy, pushes the nail in further and gives you room to actually fill the hole. Use as many long caulk lines as you can to keep it even, rather than stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting. When you're painting new drywall, rather than just repainting a room, you'll start by priming the walls to even out where there's lumps or holes that need to be filled. Rule of thumb, before you actually start painting, the best thing that you can do is sand all of the spaces quickly. You'll take something like a 220 grit, or if you have a sanding block that's like medium or light grit, you just go over everything again. Then you're gonna wipe the walls down with something microfiber or vacuum them, depending on how you wanna do it. Get all the dust out of the room, because if you have dust left, you'll get these bumpy areas in the paint that you don't want. Cleaning and getting the surface fully prepared makes a huge difference. A lot of people know that you start with the ceiling, but they don't really understand why. So you finish your ceiling, and then you never have to touch your ceiling again. When you're cutting in on the ceiling, which is honestly probably the hardest place to cut in, if you get some on the wall, it's not a big deal because you can either lightly sand it, or if it's thin enough, just go ahead and paint over it with wall paint. Usually when you're cutting in, you want to use an angle brush because it's easier to get the paint evenly in there. A lot of people think, get a lot of paint on the brush, just smear it in there. You actually are going to have a much cleaner cut line the less paint that you use. If you're going next to a door frame, sometimes it can actually be helpful to have a flat edge. This little tip at the end, when you go to turn a corner, sometimes can leave paint pooled in the corners. And so if you're using a flat brush, when you go to the corner, it stops, and then you can just turn it and it's not pushing up into the corner and leaving the same kind of bunched in the edge. But it's also a preference thing, and you'll get used to what's comfortable. I prefer smaller brushes because my hands are smaller, but even some of my painters who have small hands prefer a bigger brush because it's weighted and it helps them keep the paint evenly. Behind that, I would come in with a mini roller, use this after we cut in to smooth out the lines so that it's a little bit more seamless and you're not seeing the same brush marks. So then after you cut in, we would then take the 9-inch or the 18-inch roller, whichever you prefer, put it on a rolling pole. My rule of thumb is basically like if it's a 10-foot ceiling, you just want to be able to reach the ceiling comfortably without having your arms completely extended because you will be very uncomfortable the next day. Get your roller bucket ready, get your naps ready. Most of the time we will use a 3/4 inch nap. I prefer the 18-inch nap rather than a 9 or even a 14. As long as your room is big enough, it covers more space and you can get it done a little bit quicker. Take the roller frame and basically you just roll out the ceiling. After you finish your ceiling, it'll be time to move on to trim. You'll use a brush to frame around and get as close as you can to the edge as possible. If you go a little over, it's okay because we'll come back with the wall paint and cover any mistakes. I'd recommend doing 3 coats of paint for the trim, 2 thinner ones and 1 thicker one with sanding in between. Just make sure to brush away any drips or big globs of paint. Once your trim is dry, you'll use painter's tape and masking paper to protect from any drips. Then we'll follow the same steps that we used on the ceilings. So start with a medium brush to cut in around the doors and the trim. You can use an angle brush or a flat brush, whatever your preference is. I tend to use an angle brush because it's able to smooth out the corners a little bit better. After you brush it out, you'll want to use a mini roller to blend the cut lines into the wall and use the same 18-inch roller to come and roll all of the walls. You'll want to let it dry 2 to 4 hours, then repeat with additional coats until you have full coverage. We usually do 2 coats, but if there's a drastic color change like light to dark or dark to really light, you'll probably want to have a 3rd coat. A lot of people like to keep their original doors. Whoever painted this previously had a lot of brush strokes in it, and if you don't sand down the brush strokes, when you paint it again, you're gonna see their brush strokes. We tend to leave hinges on in general because it keeps the integrity of the wood, but especially when the door is older, I don't like to take the hinges or the knobs off. So as much as I can, I try to keep everything intact and just mask it off. I always recommend doing 2 coats of paint pretty much on anything, but especially doors. Number 1, because they get beat up a lot, but also because you want it to be stronger and it just keeps the integrity of the door. A lot of old doors have been painted with oil-based paint, and then a lot of times people will come back with latex or water-based paint on top of it. You can usually just do a test by taking it and trying to scratch it. If it scratches off super easy with a fingernail, it's probably oil-based paint, and then you would need to prime the whole thing. But as long as it's not oil-based paint, I usually just take a piece of sandpaper, I fold it with my hand, and then I go with 150 grit, then 220 grit, make sure that everything is smoothed out and that all of those brush strokes are smoothed out. As you can see up here, I went ahead and already primed with an oil-based primer. I always recommend using oil or shellac, something in it that's gonna keep the tannins in and keep the paint to stick, especially if there was stain or something oil-based. You always wanna prime anything that was oil with oil. You can always put latex paint on top of oil-based primer. You cannot put latex paint on top of oil-based paint. It will not adhere. One tip to not waste brushes is if you have an old brush, soak it in soap and water and use it as a dust brush, because once it softens out, it's actually better to have it feathered because it's a lot easier to just sweep it. Think of it like a little broom. You can just get a little bit of thinner and put it on a rag, just like a little bit of it, and just wipe it on the door. It will take any of the little bits of residue and just kind of loosen them up, as you can see, and just get some of the dirt and clean it off. Any kind of those wipes that have some like cleaning chemical on it is fine. When the door is 20, 30 years old, we end up having to strip the whole door. The biggest reason is because of flaking paint. If you see a door that has a ton of crack lines in it, could be a sign that there's lead in it. 20, 30 years old, you always want to test your doors. If I think there's lead, I will not scrape it. I'll go ahead and test it, put respirator, that kind of thing, or honestly get somebody who does lead remediation. If there's no lead and I can tell that it was just an oil-based paint, that's usually why we would strip it, because somebody has put a latex paint on top of an oil paint. When you scratch it, it just comes off. There's nothing to stick to. The next step is to actually start to paint. You're gonna want a mini roller, which is what I do a majority of the door with, and then you'll still want a brush to be able to cut in all of the corners and any of the sides. A lot of people will get a rolling tray. I don't use a rolling tray. We just put a grid in the bucket, and as long as you've got a 4-inch mini roller, it will fit in the bucket, so you can still roll with the grid to get the excess paint off of the roller. You'll still want to use a separate paint bucket than what you get the paint in, so it's not full. But once you're done with this, if you don't want to pour it back into the other can, you can just stick a lid on it and you're good to go. We will tape the brush off so that when you're having the brush like this, it's not leaking down all over your hand. When you go to cut in on a door, you'll put heavy paint just to start. But then as you're getting more paint off your brush, you don't want to dip it more. You start heavy and then you let it get thinner as you go. And then as you're getting less paint on your brush, and you'll see it become a little bit more transparent, you want to go back to the first place that you started and just start feathering it out even more in the cut line. We go ahead and we cut in all of the edges on the door and then we roll it afterwards. It's a lot easier to roll the flat areas and then you don't have brush marks all over the door. You're gonna take your roller and just go all the way up to that edge and roll over the cut line so that your brush marks go away.
been a huge upswing in the purchasing of vintage furniture recently, and I couldn't be more excited. I love this, one, not only because it is good for the environment, but two, vintage pieces add so much character and charm to a space. But something people worry about all the time is, how do you really mix modern and vintage pieces in the same space? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle in today's episode of Style Scientist. One of the best ways to mix modern and vintage pieces in a home is to just use vintage art frames. You can find these art frames at pretty much any thrift store or consignment store. They are just full of them, and they tend to be so affordable. When looking for a vintage or an antiqued frame, you want to look for some gilding, an ornate border, or any type of rusting or oxidation. You just want to see some wear and tear on that frame. When it comes to using these vintage art frames, you can do one of two things. One, you can use them as they are. You can keep the art that you got from the thrift store in them. But if you really want to create a sharp contrast between the modern and the vintage, what you can do is put modern and contemporary art pieces in those vintage frames. I absolutely love the way this looks. That's exactly what they did in this bedroom. They have a vibrant landscape that has blues and purples in it, but they also use an older frame. I just love the contrast that it creates in this space. The next way to mix modern and vintage pieces in a space is to use lacquered and unlacquered brass. Now, the reason I'm saying stick to those and not chromes and pewters is, think about a really contemporary space. Think about a New York City loft. You're always seeing the chrome and the pewter. Those are ultra contemporary. So using those colors don't always make sense when you're trying to mix the modern and vintage. One of the really interesting things about unlacquered brass is that there's no protective coating on it. So it looks nice and shiny and whatever when you first get it, but over time it ages. So it really shows the age of a piece, and I love it. It is so incredibly beautiful. Now, this is a really good example of how brass really ages a space. So in this desk setup, it's definitely modernized by this big black calendar on the wall. But these brass lamps just look just like rustic candlesticks, which I love. You can see a little bit of age on them, and it just looks old and antique, and it really works beautifully in this office space. Now, this tip is very simple, but it's also one worth saying. Only update what you have to. A lot of the times we see people run into these old properties and they'll gut everything, and they'll change everything about it and get rid of all the charm. Unless there is something that might cause damage to you, if there's like lead paint or something like that, restore them if they need to be restored so that they work. But beyond that, allow yourself to enjoy the aging of the items. That is the beauty of vintage. And honestly, a lot of vintage pieces are so much better made than pieces that are being made right now. Look at this bathroom. Everything in here screams old. They have the original door, they have this beautiful flooring, they have the antiqued millwork. They just leaned into the charm of this brownstone, and that's exactly what you want to do. Keep things as they are and enjoy the wear and tear. We want to embrace the imperfections when we are mixing these two design styles. Another great way to mix the old and the new is to repeat colors and textures to create a sense of harmony. Now, this is a piece of advice that I give you pretty much all the time when it comes to mixing any different design styles, and it isn't any different when it comes to mixing old and new pieces. When you look at this living room, you'll see that they have the rustic beams in the ceiling, and you see the same wood tone in the accent chairs and in the sideboard. All of these pieces are different ages, but they all work together because they've repeated this wood tone. Now, in this bedroom, you can see that it is very contemporary at the head of the bed, and then it gets a little bit more vintagey at the foot of the bed with that chest. The reason why this works is that there is a repeat of the colors. We have this dark color with that accent wall, and we also have a dark color in that antique chest. If those colors were not practically the same, the chest would stick out like a sore thumb because it would feel really out of place with all of the other modern elements in this room. Something that I see people struggle with all the time when it comes to mixing the modern and the vintage is they don't remember that vintage doesn't have to mean 1600s. Vintage can mean the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. I mean, look at this space. This space is groovy. There's the orange, there's the red. It just screams 60s and 70s. And these are vintage pieces, just as pieces are that you're getting from the 1800s. Just keep in mind that vintage can mean a lot of things, so you don't just have to look for Versailles style items to create a combination between the modern and the vintage in your space. Something also worth keeping in mind is that when you're mixing modern and vintage, you're going for a collected look, not so much a curated look. When you're mixing these pieces, you are finding vintage pieces over time. You're finding them from your travels, by thrifting, on the internet, at an estate sale. You find these things over time. You're not just going to the store and saying, hey, I'm buying this 6 set of art and they all perfectly work together. It just isn't gonna work that way. This is another case in point where we are going to embrace the imperfections in our home. Now, I just love this dark academia gallery wall. It is giving everything that it could possibly give. They're using color to really anchor the space, but you'll also notice that the items in the gallery wall don't all perfectly go together. These are items that have been collected. So I say, shop for things you enjoy, think about a color palette, but you honestly don't have to. Just find things you like and realize that this design style is going to take some time to achieve. Now, these days, we don't have the same needs as people had before, right? So when we have pieces, we want to find novel ways to use them. We don't want to bring things into our home that do not have a function. So this is a great example. This person uses an apothecary table in their dining area. So it's still providing storage for the items in their dining area, and it is a great place for them to sit decor on top of. So they're using a vintage piece, but they're using it in a novel way. Just keep in mind that we do not have the same needs as people had 100 years ago, 200 years ago, even 50 years ago. The last tip I want to share for mixing modern and vintage pieces is to layer modern and vintage pieces on top of one another, literally. Of course, we talk about layering spaces all the time, but I really want you to stack one on top of the other. This is a great to mix them. Again, we're gonna repeat patterns, we're gonna repeat colors. You're like, okay, style scientist, you're on repeat about this. Well, that's for a good reason. But we wanna repeat those colors and patterns, but we literally want to stack them so that they work together. For example, this vintage rug sits underneath 2 very contemporary accent chairs, and then there's vintage art on the wall. There is a layer of vintage, a layer of modern, and then a layer of vintage. This is another example. We have a zebra print rug on the floor that has a more contemporary flair, and then we have a traditional sideboard and other traditional elements. We kind of want to evenly balance the number of modern pieces and the number of vintage pieces that we're using in a space. So again, that one of them does not stick out and seem like it's in a place where it does not belong. I gave you all of the tools and tricks you need in today's video. That is how you mix modern and contemporary items in the same space. Are you going to start mixing modern and vintage pieces in your space? Let me know down in the comments.
Hi friends, I'm Carmion Hamilton, Memphis-based interior designer and HGTV host. I get asked a lot about styling and shelf styling in particular, and there are a lot of misconceptions, common mistakes, things that cause people paralyzing fear when it comes to styling shelves, and I'm here to help out with that. When it comes to styling shelves, I personally have a collection of things that I go to when it comes to pretty much any shelf. Books is one. You want beautiful objects with either varying textures, shiny textures, matte textures, whatever they are, but varying sizes of beautiful objects is also key. Another thing that I go for are pedestals, things that I can use to elevate beautiful objects in the instance that they're not big enough. You can use books as pedestals or actual pedestals themselves. Lastly are things that are personal, things that you've collected on vacation, or they could be your favorite pair of shoes, but something that speaks directly to who you are. Think of your shelf as a canvas or even as a room. Also consider the color palette of your space. Sometimes you want your shelves to just recede to the background and you want them to be interesting, so things that are just neutral are perfectly fine, or you can have some lively shelves and think color, things that can accent what's already happening in the space. A great tip and a must-have for styling shelves is giving things of importance breathing room. The eye needs a place to rest, so collecting things in their own vignettes. I have kind of a loose rule. If you have about a 36-inch wide shelf, then 1 to 3 small vignettes are enough, but this shelving unit is 72 inches wide. It's 6 feet wide, so I can double the number of vignettes. And when I say vignette, I mean these these individual moments. So this stack of books with this abstract figure on top of it is one vignette, or this book with the plants and the candle is one vignette. So I have several different moments, and in this case, it's 4, but they're kind of close together because everything speaks to each other. Whether you have a 10-foot wide shelf or a 3-foot wide shelf, giving those things room to breathe where you can appreciate the shelf itself is key. I never design a room with all brand new things. That is like a no-no to any well-designed space. And you don't want a shelf of all brand new things. Shelves are interesting when things feel collected. So don't just go out and buy a bunch of things that look alike. Shop your home for things that you've already lived with and probably need some new life. So go and grab that beautiful jewelry box that's sitting on your vanity. Put that on your shelves. Or maybe even your favorite candlesticks that live on your dining table. Pull things from throughout your home and have them be a collection of the room that is your shelf. A common mistake that I see on shelves are small things. These small things are just haphazardly placed and not really given the presence they deserve. There are 2 ways to combat small things: collecting them in mass, which makes them one big thing, or elevating them, so putting them on pedestals, stacking them on top of books, giving them some presence that take them from this tiny little thing to elevating them to something special. So another thing that we have to combat are these things that are essential to life but aren't necessarily always pretty. So I love incorporating boxes or vessels, things that can corral those things and hide them, or just collect them into one space so they're not spread all over your shelf space. So beautiful bowls are great for keys and mail and whatever comes out of your pockets when you arrive home, or a beautiful lidded box, something where you can put whatever needs to go in the box on your shelf. Another way to add interest to your shelves is to think about depth. What's on the front, what's closest to your viewer, and what's closest to the back. Here, I've varied the glassware on the front. This is something we access the most, so you can reach up and grab it. Things that we don't use go in the back, and the things that are taller go in the back. But one thing I feel like people forget is you still have canvas space or wall space in your shelving. I've leaned a piece of artwork up here, but if you have special small pieces that you love, you can just hang them on the wall in between your shelves to get the same effect. Execution to styling shelves can be a little bit tricky, but it is not rocket science. This video exists so that you have somewhere to come back to as a resource to help you get it right. But once you get it right, you're gonna change it again. Our shelves are ever-changing canvases because we grow as people, we collect new things, our interests change, and that's what your things on display should reflect.
Hi, I'm Eric Kenneth Stolberg, and if you've just seen my home tour, as a prop stylist, you'll know that I love collecting and curating items around my house. And one of the hardest things to style is a bookcase. So today I'm breaking down the basics. Let's get into it. To begin, the best thing you can do is take everything off the shelves. You want to clean everything, dust it, really make it sparkle, and now you have a blank canvas to work with. So once you take everything off the shelf, you can organize things by category: books, vases, art, things like that. And that will only make the process of rebuilding the shelves and restyling them that much easier. So a great tip to start is by making the same styled shelf on different sides of the bookcases at different heights, and that way you're only styling half the shelves and just duplicating the other half, and it just cuts your work in half. It's so much easier. So I always start with books. I feel like whether they're art books or novels, it creates a good height difference within the same shelf. So I often put a couple stacked and a little trinket on top, and it just gives a really clean visual for highlighting specific items. So after the books are in place, I always start with my biggest items first, and that's a great way to see what gaps are there, and also so there isn't too much weight or heaviness in the shelves. It just keeps things really balanced. So next, I always use trinket boxes. They're so good for stacking and again creating height variance, and they're so decorative and beautiful and store such nice little things. So whatever you do, don't forget to add plants. Making sure that there's a natural element, especially in a bookcase, can keep it from being too stiff, and making sure it feels organic and fresh. Also, always make sure there is some sort of element of art in your bookcases, whether that's, a small painting leaning on the back, or in my case, in these bookcases, all of my cherished family photographs. It's really good to make sure you're having some 2D elements mixed in with all your 3D objects. It just keeps things from being, too one note. So lastly, you're gonna take all of your small, tiny little trinkets that you don't know what to do, and these now are going to be peppered in throughout the bookcase. And they often become friends of bigger items, so they're not floating off in space. They have, some security there. And it's great because it just keeps your eye moving. Again, we're balancing the height variance, and it really is a good way to display your smalls.
Hi, my name is Judy Aldridge, and if you saw my home tour, you know that I love collecting art. Today, I'm going to show you tips on how to display your own art collection. My first tip is that it's important to have a lot of different types of art, whether it's paintings or bold graphic prints or even found objects. I like to use old African trading beads in mine. Whatever you have, it could be a small mirror made of shells. Just mix it up. Secondly, I think it's important to have black and white in your art collection. It really helps pull everything together and will make your other pieces really pop. Next, make sure that you mix your collection. Don't have just new pieces, mix it with vintage. This will make sure that your collection looks curated as opposed to purchased. When you're making a gallery wall, make sure there's a lot of asymmetry. It will move your eye around and make it much more visually pleasing. Lastly, art doesn't have to just be on the wall. Add a sculpture. It's a great way to add height to a room and texture.
The kitchen is one of the most used spaces in the house. Doing a deep clean doesn't have to feel impossible. It can actually be simple and super satisfying. The sink is literally where all the dirty things go. Greasy pans, messy plates, food scraps. It's a bacteria hotspot, so I always start here. The aerator at the tip of your faucet collects mineral buildup, which can make your water flow weird or even trap bacteria. Just grab a plastic sandwich bag, fill it with white vinegar, and secure it around the faucet head with a rubber band. And then soak it for about an hour. When it's done, take off the bag and scrub with a small brush to get rid of any leftover gunk. For the sink itself, you don't need harsh chemicals, just baking soda and dish soap. Sprinkle the baking soda all over the sink, drizzle dish soap on top, and then grab a sponge and scrub it down. Baking soda is mildly abrasive, so it helps lift grime without damaging the finish. Once it's all scrubbed, rinse it clean, and it's so much better. If you have a garbage disposal, let's freshen that up too. I drop it in a fresh garbage disposal tablet, turn it on a low stream of water, and then flip the switch and let it do its thing. It helps break down grease and food buildup while also getting rid of any weird smells. Deep cleaning the fridge can feel like a huge task, so I always plan it before grocery shopping. That way there's less in there to move around. First, take everything out. If you're worried about food staying cold, just transfer it to a cooler with some ice packs while you're cleaning. Now, time to remove all the shelves and drawers. These are usually covered in sticky spills, crumbs, and mystery gunk, so I like to let them sit at room temperature to warm up for a few minutes before washing. Before spraying any cleaner, I use my vacuum with a crevice tool to quickly suck up any crumbs and dried up food bits. This makes wiping way easier since it's not pushing around extra mess. Now here's my favorite DIY all-purpose cleaner. It's 1 cup vinegar, 1 cup water, and 1 teaspoon dish soap. Shake it up and you've got a cleaner that works everywhere. For the shelves and drawers, I soak them in warm water, 2 cups vinegar, and 2 tablespoons dish soap for about 20 minutes while I clean the rest of the fridge. This helps loosen stuck-on food so they wipe clean easily. While the shelves are soaking, I spray down the whole inside of the fridge with our DIY all-purpose cleaner and go in with this little scrub brush. It's got nylon bristles, so it's perfect for getting into all the nooks and crannies. If you don't have one, an old toothbrush works totally fine too. Once everything is dry and back in place, I give it one last wipe down with a microfiber cloth. I like to add a baking soda container in the back of the fridge to absorb odors. It's a classic trick, but it really works. For the exterior, I always dust first before adding any cleaner. I use my favorite stainless steel cleaner and buff everything with a microfiber towel going with the grain. I find the foaming sprays remove fingerprints the best. The oven gets nasty fast. First, remove the oven rack and let them soak in warm water with 2 dishwasher pods for around 3 hours. The longer they soak, the better the result. This helps loosen grease and makes scrubbing way easier. Before spraying anything inside, I use a vacuum with a crevice tool to suck up crumbs and burnt bits. Instead of using harsh chemicals, I make a simple baking soda paste. 2 cups baking soda and enough water to make a thick paste. You can adjust the recipe to fit the size of your oven. Wearing gloves, I spread the paste all over the inside of my oven, making sure to get into corners and seams. Let it sit for 20 minutes or until it starts to dry out. Then spray with vinegar. The reaction helps break up tough grease. I use a plastic scraper tool to lift the grime, and it's so satisfying to see it come off. Just keep scraping and spray more vinegar as needed and wipe everything down with a microfiber towel. For the cooktop, first wipe up crumbs, and for those baked on spots, I gently scrape with a razor blade. It works like a charm. Then I use a foaming dish spray to cut through grease and scrub with a non-abrasive pad. To make it shine, I finish with a fresh stovetop cleaner, let it sit for about 10 minutes, then buff it with a microfiber cloth. A steam cleaner is also great for loosening grime in seams or hard-to-reach spots. For the microwave, fill a bowl with 1 cup vinegar and 1 cup water. Microwave for 5 minutes. The steam loosens stuck-on food, making it easy to wipe down. Then I'll reach for our all-purpose vinegar spray and a microfiber cloth. Don't forget to tackle the vent filter. This collects grease so fast. I'll usually replace mine at least every 6 to 8 months or sooner if you notice a significant buildup of grease or a decrease in performance. For the outside, I use the control lock feature on my microwave so I don't annoyingly press buttons as I clean. I use a glass cleaner and this handy microfiber buffer to help me get behind the handle and around the touchpad. You'd think that since the dishwasher cleans dishes, it would clean itself too. Nope. Over time, it collects grease, grime, and even food buildup in places like the door seals, filter, and detergent tray. So let's get it fresh and clean. First, I'll slide out the bottom rack and twist out the filter. If you've never done this before, brace yourself. It can get really gross. I just wash it in the sink with dish soap and a scrub brush to gently remove any trapped gunk. Next, I grab my all-purpose cleaner and wipe down the door seals, detergent tray, and the inside of the door. These areas collect so much buildup. Now on to the easiest part. Just pop in a fresh dishwasher cleaner tablet and run a hot cycle. This helps break down hard water buildup, grease, and odors, and it's so satisfying to see the difference. You should do this once a month to keep your dishwasher running at its best. A dirty coffee maker doesn't just taste bad, it can also build up lime scale, coffee oils, and bacteria over time. So let's get it back to brewing fresh and clean. First, I'll grab all the removable parts and wash them in the sink with dish soap. For my reusable pod, I let it soak in a bowl of vinegar while I clean the rest of the machine. Then I grab a small brush, dip it in the vinegar, and scrub around the pod holder and machine base. These spots can collect a lot of grime. Next up, fill the water reservoir with 4 cups of white vinegar and 2 cups of water. Then just start the brewing cycle. Be sure to run 2 to 3 more cycles of clean water, that way there's no lingering taste of vinegar in that next cup of coffee. Now that the appliances are clean, it's time to refresh the countertops. For tough countertop stains, I mix baking soda and vinegar into a paste and apply it to the stain. Once it dries, I wipe it away. It truly works like magic. Then I grab my DIY all-purpose cleaner and spray everything down. I also use a microfiber cloth to wipe away grease and crumbs. For an extra layer of disinfecting, I use another DIY spray, which is a combination of 1 cup water and 1 cup isopropyl alcohol. You guys, We did it. The last step is bringing it all together. I dust and wipe down cabinet doors, drawer pulls, and high-touch surfaces. You should always finish with the floors, vacuuming first, and then hitting with a steam cleaner. Finally, I love adding a fresh touch, maybe a candle, some fresh flowers, or just stepping back and admiring how clean and reset the kitchen feels. Let's be real, no one dreams about cleaning their bathroom, but considering how much time we spend in here every day, it gets grimy fast. First things first, I clear everything off my countertop. Soap dispensers, toothbrushes, all of it. It makes wiping way easier. Before I grab any cleaner, I do a dry wipe down to remove hair, dust, and water spots. Trust me, trying to clean a wet hair strand, it's a nightmare. Dry first, then clean. It's a game changer. One spot people always forget about is the faucet aerator. That little mesh piece where the water comes out. If yours is removable, soak it in vinegar. Otherwise, a small scrub brush and vinegar will break down any hard water buildup. For the sink itself, you don't need fancy cleaners. I use equal parts dish soap and baking soda on a sponge. This combo has just the right amount of grit to break down grime. Also, always be sure to scrub the underside of where the sink and the countertop meet. Another important area is around the drain, since that's where pink bacteria, yup, it's airborne, loves to build up. And don't forget the overflow drain. That little hole near the top of your sink traps so much gunk. Now, if you have marble countertops like me, be careful. Vinegar and harsh cleaners are a no-go since marble is porous. Instead, mix a tiny bit of pH-neutral dish soap in warm water and wipe everything down with a microfiber cloth. Okay, deep breath. It's toilet time. But don't worry, it doesn't have to be gross. Just like with the counter, I start by dry dusting the toilet lid, tank, seat, and sides to remove dust before adding any liquid cleaner. For an all-purpose spray that actually works, I mix 1 cup vinegar, 1 cup water, and 1 teaspoon dish soap. Spray it everywhere and let it sit for a minute. This gives the cleaner time to break down the grime while I tackle the bowl. One spot everyone forgets is the underside rim of the bowl. This is where hard water stains love to hide. A melamine sponge works wonders here. Gloves on, scrub the area first before moving to the rest of the bowl. Once the toilet bowl cleaner has done its thing, grab your brush and scrub from top to bottom, finishing at the drain. When you flush, twist the brush down the drain, then set it to dry between the seat and the lid. Then give the outside of the toilet a good wipe down with a disposable paper towel. For an extra deep clean, a handheld steam cleaner with a nozzle attachment is amazing for getting into seams and crevices. For a fresh scent, I drop a foaming toilet balm as a final step. The best way to clean your shower head is to set it and forget it. For the shower walls, I use the same DIY all-purpose spray of 1 cup vinegar, 1 cup water, and 1 teaspoon dish soap. Then scrub with a melamine sponge. I also hit the shower fixtures using the same method. When cleaning the tub, I focus on the area where the walls meet the tub. This is where soap scum builds up the most. A sprayable dish detergent works great since it's made to cut through grease and grime. I scrub and then give it a good rinse. I use a pitcher for better control, but if you have a handheld shower head, that works great too. For grout, I actually prefer to use an acid-free grout cleaner like Black Diamond that has a more gentle touch. Just spray it on, let it sit for a minute or two, and then scrub and rinse, making it safe for use on porcelain, ceramic, and marble surfaces, and also revives the original color of the grout. A handheld steam cleaner also works great for sanitizing and loosening stubborn buildup in the fixture's seams and crevices. To get a streak-free mirror, I use the S-pattern method, top to bottom, side to side. And if I spot any smudges after, a microfiber cloth does the trick. Alright, I swear by foaming glass cleaner. Not just for mirrors, but also for baseboards, especially if you have pets. Just spray, wipe with a microfiber cloth, and it's literal magic. I also clean each item individually before putting it back, so I'm not just redepositing dust and gunk. The small details really make the space feel fresh. Plus, now the most stressful part of your bathroom is deciding whether the toilet paper should roll over or under.
Pain Nail Gun Nelly. Today, I am gonna show you a creative way to get extra storage in between your studs. I have this vacant space. You need to find the studs. There are a few steps that you check off before you go cutting into all of your walls. Ensure that there's no electrical vents, piping. Make sure that you're not gonna cut through anything. Okay, we're gonna build an insert, pop it in. Secure the backing and put the shelves in. Secure these in. Add our hinge and we'll be done. Having it hidden makes it so much cooler. Now for the artwork. Hidden storage. Dang, that's nice. Easy peasy.
Want your curtains to look amazing? Well, let me show you how. First, locate the wall stud to determine if you need drywall anchors or not. Then measure and mark your wall. I like to hang mine as high as possible. It just makes the room feel bigger and taller. A good rule? Mount your brackets about 1 inch or 2 from the ceiling or 8 to 12 inches above the window if you've got really tall ceilings. When you're ready to install, place your brackets just past the window on both sides. If you've got a really wide window, make sure to add a middle bracket for extra support. For the perfect curtain rod length, take the window length and add 6 to 12 inches on each side. Now for the fun part, hang your curtains. I love these trendy pinch pleat curtains. When you hang them, keep them at the edge of the window so the glass is uncovered. It makes sure everything feels brighter and more open. Lastly, because the rod is high, make sure your curtains are long enough to just skim the floor. And that's it, an easy home update you can do this weekend.